Level 1. Sudden. We begin at the first level, where death arrives in seconds. These are the deaths that offer one small mercy: speed. The NASCAR legend. On February 18, 2001, the Daytona 500 was coming to its final lap. The race was the biggest event in NASCAR, and the man in the black number 3 Chevrolet was its most famous driver. The legendary racer was known as the Intimidator for his aggressive style. Fans expected him to finish strong, as he had so many times before. As the pack of cars rushed toward the final turn, his Chevrolet made contact with another vehicle. He lost control and slammed head-on into the concrete wall at nearly 155 miles per hour. The impact was sudden and violent. At first, it did not look like a fatal crash. The car wasn't torn apart, and there was no fire. From the stands, many thought he would climb out as he had so many times before. But inside the cockpit, the situation was very different. The collision caused what doctors later called a basal skull fracture, a break at the base of the skull where it connects to the spine. It is one of the most severe injuries in racing. Medical experts explain that the injury is not always instantly fatal. For a few seconds, the driver can remain conscious, feeling intense pain, confusion, and a sudden struggle to breathe before the body shuts down. That is what happened to him. Rescuers reached his car within moments, but he was unresponsive. He was rushed to Halifax Medical Center, where doctors tried to revive him. At 5:16 in the afternoon, the legendary NASCAR driver was pronounced gone. Millions of fans were left in disbelief, unable to accept that a driver who had seemed untouchable on the track was no longer alive. His crash led directly to sweeping safety changes in NASCAR, including the mandatory use of the Hans device to prevent head and neck injuries, redesigned car structures, and safer walls at tracks. At level 1, death came within seconds. Brief consciousness, then nothing. But what happens when those seconds stretch into hours? Level 2, trapped and aware. The medical student. On November 24, 2009, a 26-year-old medical student entered the Nutty Putty Cave in Utah with his brother and several friends. He was an experienced caver with a wife and young daughter. The cave system was known for its tight passages, but he had navigated challenging spaces before. Around 8 in the evening, he crawled headfirst into a narrow passage he thought would lead to a popular section called the Birth Canal. Instead, he entered an unmapped tunnel that angled sharply downward. The passage was 18 inches wide and 10 inches tall. As he pushed forward, the tunnel narrowed further. When he tried to back out, he couldn't. His arms were pinned at his sides. He was stuck 150 feet underground, suspended upside down at a 70-degree angle. Rescuers arrived within hours. They could hear him speaking. He was conscious, alert, and able to communicate. The problem was his position. Hanging inverted, gravity pulled blood into his head while his heart worked against itself to pump. His legs were above him. Every breath became more difficult as fluid accumulated in his lungs. Rescue teams worked through the night, drilling anchor points and threading rope systems to try pulling him free. At one point, they managed to move him a few inches upward. Then a pulley system failed. He slipped back down into the crevice, deeper than before. For 28 hours, he remained trapped. He spoke with rescuers about his family. He asked them to tell his wife he loved her. He knew what was happening to his body. His heart couldn't sustain the inverted position. On November 25th, just before midnight, the 26-year-old medical student went into cardiac arrest. Rescuers were still working around him, but there was nothing more they could do. The cave was too narrow to retrieve his body. Nutty Putty Cave was sealed with concrete shortly after, becoming his permanent tomb. He had nearly a full day to understand his situation, to speak with people trying to save him, and to know that death was approaching. But at least fire wasn't involved. Level 3. Burning alive. The young slave woman. In the year 177, during the reign of Marcus Aurelius, Christians in the Roman city of Lyon were arrested and brought to trial. Among them was a young slave woman. She was not a leader, not a teacher, simply a believer. Roman authorities demanded she renounce her faith. She refused. What followed was documented by witnesses and recorded in early church histories. She was taken to the amphitheater, where public executions served as entertainment. The crowd gathered, expecting a quick spectacle. They did not get one. Finally, the Romans brought out a brazen bull, a bronze statue shaped like a bull with a hollow interior. A fire was lit beneath it. She was placed inside. As the metal heated, it conducted temperature directly into the chamber. The bronze glowed red. The air inside became superheated. Her skin blistered, then blackened. The heat consumed oxygen, making every breath an act of will. For hours, the torture continued. The crowd eventually grew silent. What had begun as entertainment became something else entirely. Even the Roman guards, men who had witnessed countless executions, reported being disturbed by how long she remained aware. When she finally stopped moving, the Romans removed what remained. The young slave woman had endured one of the longest recorded public executions in Roman history. She had been whipped, burned, gored, and roasted, remaining conscious through methods designed to inflict maximum suffering. Fire destroys from the outside in. But what if something consumed you piece by piece while you watched it happen? Level 4. Devoured alive. The bear enthusiast. For 13 consecutive summers, a wildlife enthusiast lived among grizzly bears in Alaska's Katmai National Park. He filmed them, spoke to them, and believed he had formed a unique bond with the animals. By October 2003, he had spent over 35,000 hours in bear territory. That month, he and his girlfriend were camped near Kaflia Bay. The salmon run had ended. Most bears had moved inland to den for winter. The bears that remained were desperate, starving, and unpredictable. On October 5th, around 5 in the afternoon, a large male grizzly entered their campsite. What happened next was captured on audio. His video camera was recording, but the lens cap remained on. For 6 minutes, the tape rolled, documenting only sound. His screams filled the recording. He yelled for his girlfriend to run, to get away, to save herself. But she didn't run. She grabbed a frying pan and tried to fight the bear. The audio reveals the reality of a grizzly attack. It is not quick. The bear did not strike once and leave. He remained conscious as the animal fed on him. His screams continued, becoming weaker, more desperate, until finally they stopped. Then the bear turned its attention to his girlfriend. Her screams began where his ended. When park rangers arrived the next day, they found both bodies partially consumed. His head, right arm, and part of his torso were later recovered from the bear's stomach. The autopsy confirmed both victims were alive during the initial attack. Bite marks on defensive wounds showed they had tried to protect themselves. The bear had not attacked out of predatory instinct in the traditional sense. It consumed him slowly, methodically, as he remained aware. His girlfriend was forced to hear every moment before experiencing the same fate. The entire event, from first scream to final silence, lasted approximately 6 minutes. 6 minutes of being eaten alive while conscious. Park rangers located and sent the responsible bear to the Shadow Realm. Inside its digestive system, they found human remains still being processed. Previous deaths, however brutal, had moments of chaos. The next level is methodical, mechanical, and utterly impossible to escape. Level 5. Crushed slowly. The 80-year-old farmer. In 1692, during the Salem witch trials, an 80-year-old farmer was accused of witchcraft. When brought before the court, he refused to enter a plea. Without a plea of guilty or innocent, the trial could not proceed. Under English law, there was a solution for this problem. It was called peine forte et dure. On September 19th, he was taken to an open field beside the Salem jail. He was stripped naked and forced to lie on the ground. A wooden board was placed across his chest. Then the pressing began. The process was designed to be gradual. Small rocks were added to the board one at a time. The weight increased slowly, giving him multiple opportunities to enter a plea and stop the ordeal. He refused. More rocks were added. His chest began to compress. Breathing became difficult as the weight pressed down on his rib cage. The first day ended with significant weight on his chest, but he remained alive. He spent the night pinned beneath the board, unable to move, each breath a struggle. The next morning, the pressing resumed. More rocks were placed. His ribs began to crack under the pressure. The sound was audible to those standing nearby. Still, he would not speak except to say 2 words: more weight. On the third day, September 21st, the board held enough rocks that his chest was nearly flat against his spine. His ribs had broken in multiple places. His internal organs were being crushed. The pain was described by witnesses as beyond comprehension. Every breath required forcing air into lungs that had no room to expand. And still, he remained conscious. According to accounts from that day, his tongue was pressed out of his mouth by the pressure. The sheriff pushed it back in with his cane. His final words, spoken with a crushed chest and broken ribs, were the same as before: more weight. Shortly after, the 80-year-old farmer was sent to the Shadow Realm. He had endured 72 hours of incremental crushing. His death was slow, calculated, and measured in the careful addition of stones over 3 full days. He could see his executioners, breathe air, and speak his defiance. The next level removes all of that, trapped in darkness, underground, completely alone. Level 6, buried alive. The young mother. In 1891, a young mother lived in Pikeville, Kentucky. She fell ill with a mysterious sickness that swept through the region. Doctors at the time believed it was related to the tsetse fly. Though the exact diagnosis remained unclear, her symptoms progressed rapidly. Within days, she fell into a deep coma. Her breathing became so shallow it was nearly undetectable. Her pulse weakened to the point where physicians could not find it. On a warm afternoon in early May, she was declared gone. Her body was prepared for burial and placed in a wooden coffin. She was interred in a local cemetery within 24 hours, as was customary in that era before modern embalming. The coffin was lowered into the ground and covered with soil. Several weeks later, another person in Pikeville fell into a similar coma. This time, the patient woke up. Then another case occurred, and another. The mysterious illness was not fatal. It induced a death-like state that could last for days, but victims eventually regained consciousness. The realization spread through the town like wildfire. If these people had woken up, then perhaps others had as well. Others who had already been buried. Her husband ordered her coffin exhumed immediately. When workers opened the grave and pried the lid from the coffin, they found her body face down. Her fingernails were torn completely off. The interior of the coffin lid was scratched and splintered, with deep gouges carved into the wood. The silk lining had been shredded into strips. Her hands were bloody, her face frozen in an expression witnesses described as absolute terror. The evidence was unmistakable. She had woken up underground, alone, in complete darkness. She had realized where she was. She had clawed at the coffin lid with enough force to destroy her fingernails and tear through fabric and wood. She had screamed, though no one could hear. She had fought until her oxygen ran out. The struggle had lasted hours, possibly longer, before she finally suffocated in the pitch-black silence of her own grave. Every level so far has ended with the person being sent to the Shadow Realm. The final level removes even that mercy. Level 7, the absolute worst. The nuclear plant worker. On September 30th, 1999, a 35-year-old worker was on duty at a nuclear fuel processing plant in Tokaimura, Japan. A criticality accident occurred when uranium reached critical mass. He was standing directly next to the reaction. He absorbed 17 sieverts of radiation. For context, 10 sieverts is considered universally fatal. The radiation destroyed his DNA instantly. His chromosomes were photographed under microscopes and appeared completely shattered. At the cellular level, his body lost the ability to repair or replicate itself. He was brought to the University of Tokyo Hospital, where doctors understood immediately that he would not survive. But they kept him alive anyway. In the first week, his skin began to fall off in sheets. It would regenerate, but improperly, then fall off again. The cycle repeated continuously. His intestinal lining, which regenerates every few days in a healthy person, could not repair itself. It shed constantly, making it impossible for his body to absorb nutrients or water. He was fed intravenously, but his veins began to collapse. By week 2, his immune system had completely failed. Infections covered his body. His lungs began to fill with fluid. He required a ventilator to breathe. Open wounds appeared across his skin, where tissue simply stopped holding together. He remained conscious through most of this. Medical records show he communicated with staff, asking repeatedly for the suffering to end. He said, "I can't take it anymore." Doctors resuscitated him 3 times when his heart stopped. Each time, they brought him back. Medical photography documented his deterioration, though the images remained classified. Staff members who treated him reported psychological trauma. Several left the medical field entirely. For 83 days, the 35-year-old worker existed in a state where his body was simultaneously alive and decomposing. Every form of suffering from previous levels was present. Burning sensations from nerve damage, crushing pressure from fluid buildup, suffocation from lung failure, the feeling of being consumed as his body digested itself, and complete awareness throughout nearly all of it. On December 21st, 1999, after 2,000 hours of continuous cellular destruction, his body finally stopped functioning. His heart gave out for the final time, and doctors did not revive him again. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.